Managing creatives. For most managers, it's their worst nightmare, worse even than herding cats. After all, creatives are temperamental, they're unpredictable, they're flighty, and generally they're high maintenance. As one observer remarked, lock them in the boardroom, slide pizzas under the door until they come up with something useful. But GIBS MBA Nicole Mason has done some investigating and finds out that not only there may be very different kinds of creative professionals, but also understanding that difference is the key to managing them. Nicole, welcome. Good to see you. You've looked specifically at creative design professionals. Why?
Because I felt that in terms of management theory, there was an enormous gap just here, is that creative design professionals are also required to operate in the commercial world and the real world and try to make some money. And managing their productivity is also very important. And I just felt that there was a gap there on how we actually make some money in the creative design fields without killing creativity and how to get them to work together. And I felt that there must be a secret somewhere, but probably hadn't been discovered yet.
What was the secret?
The secret is that you can't lump creative people all together and say, well, there's my bunch of impossible people, and allow them to hold your production hostage to their creative personalities. It requires a great deal of understanding of how creative people work and how they think, and also where they are in terms of how creative or how technical what they're required to do is, because they behave very differently depending where they are on that continuum.
One very famous creative with whom you spoke, John Hunt of Hunt Lascaris, calls it a dance between chaos and control. That's the clue, isn't it? Because you can call it a dance, but you can also call it a continuum.
Yes, well, creativity has been defined as the point where innovation and usefulness dovetail and come together. So it's where art and science meet. And you're always trying to get to that particular point in the middle where you're not only fulfilling a brief, but you're doing it in a new or a beautiful or an artistic kind of way. And creative people have to hold those two things in balance all the time. And that is actually the trick to managing them, is how to get them to be both simultaneously.
So what are the keys? I mean, if you imagine a prima ballerina at one end of the spectrum, someone designing car engines at the other, choreography versus engineering, but they're both highly creative.
They are both highly creative, but people at the different ends of these spectrums motivate differently, and they're required to use their brains differently, and they operate differently, and they require different management techniques. So your trick is to find out where they are on the spectrum and then adjust your management style accordingly. Because what's going to work for a prima ballerina is not going to work for an engineer. And what's going to work for an engineer is going to leave people, like in advertising, for instance, feeling sort of lost and unsupervised. So
some creative designers, you're saying, need very careful, very close management, lots of feedback. Others need to be left alone.
They do, and it's quite counterintuitive, because the more artistic people perceive themselves to be, you'd think that these are the people who'd like artistic freedom, but it turns out that they're the actual people who require the most management intervention to pretty much keep them on track. And those people who are more technical, sort of doing more sort of design engineering, you'd think that these people would actually welcome the kind of control, but they're the people who actually are quite happy to control themselves, and they're the ones who need the freedom and the responsibility.
So when you're hiring in this sphere, you need to know where your type of creative organisation sits on the continuum, where you as a manager sit on the continuum, and then only what kind of person you need to look out for.
Yes, you have to have a very good understanding of what you want to do strategically and what kind of organisation you want to be, and then you can attract that particular kind of person and manage them accordingly. The problems arise when your vision of yourself and your management style are at odds or on different ends of the spectrum.
Know thyself. Nicole Mason, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.